Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Wild Portishead live show. Goodness me, Chris, we are racking these up this year, aren't we?
We certainly are, and boy, aren't they getting popular. Not only have we picked up a lot of new local friends, but we're also picking up national friends, and wait for it, grip onto something tight, international friends.
Really? Yeah. I know a couple of people in the Americas that watch this show, so a big hello to them as well. So that's
whilst
very
you're
nice.
out there, if you're going to do that, hi to everyone in Norway and Sweden.
Enjoy your lutefisk. We have got some guests tonight, and we are going to be talking about wildlife and weed killers. So, Chris, would you like to introduce the guests tonight, please?
Well, first of all, I think, when we did our last show, we were talking a lot about the insect decline. And it's really interesting. I think a lot of media outlets must have watched our show, because since the time of our last show to this show, everybody's now talking about the fact that there aren't any insects. I can give you an update from the garden. The buddleia now that I was talking about last time, one bush has now waned completely. It's gone to seed. The other one's now coming into flower, but still the results are the same. Big zero. And there's been some rumblings around the Yatton area. And so tonight we've got two people from our friends over there in Yatwag, the Yatton and Consbury Wildlife Action Group. We've got Higgy. You want to bring him in?
Hello, everyone.
And Richard Croucher.
Hello, everyone.
Now, before we go on, let me just say that our next guest that's coming on, because we've got another guest to come on, Richard, Jonathan, and myself, we actually went earlier on in the year, didn't we, to a meeting. We can have a broader talk about that a little bit later. But first of all, Higgy and Richard, whichever one of you wants to go first, what's been the issue?
I think it's the North Somerset Council's spraying of weed killers still to control weeds in our villages in particular, and certainly here in Yatton. What we actually witnessed last week was the old quad bike going up the pavement on some of the local roads right by the school on an extremely windy day, which HSE says the health and safety executives say they shouldn't spray on, and basically having the tank fully open, so the lamps fully open, so they're blanket spraying. A lot of that spray is blowing not only into front gardens, but it's missing the weeds they're targeting, and it's going over into the school as well, with young children playing and being active. Certainly here in Yatton and through Yatwag, we have canvassed the council about its use of weed killers, and it's fallen on deaf ears, and we can't get the council to engage on that. Personally, myself, I'm extremely interested in this because I've been recording insect records in North Somerset for 20 years or so now, and certainly in my own garden for that time. My own insect records are down 70% this year, and butterfly records 90%, as Chris alluded to just now. And weed killer is certainly part of the problem, because many of our insects have a special relationship with plants, and particularly wildflowers, or what a lot of our gardeners call weeds. And we need to work out how we address this and stop this from happening, really, and try and halt this decline.
Higgy, that's interesting you say that, because we had the weed killer wagon, the quad bike was up our road here in Portishead probably about 6 weeks ago. Again, absolutely no kind of application as to what they were doing. They were just blasting everything on the angle between people's properties and the pavement. The other thing is that absolutely no safety gear on whatsoever. They're just literally just in their kind of like shirts and work clothes, blasting everything with weed killer. And I'm thinking to myself, that can't be right, surely.
No, I think you're correct, and I've witnessed this not only in Yatton, but in other places over the years, really. And even sat on a quad bike, blanket spraying with lit cigarettes hanging out their mouth. So health and safety has been breached for sure, and that is an issue. But I think it's the damage it's doing to our ecology, which is the real issue for us as wildlife enthusiasts, and wildlife is already struggling with climate change, with habitat loss. So to actually be, non-selective poisons, if you like, be that herbicides or insecticides, it's a real problem. And it's a bigger story than just those health and safety laws being broken. I think the other thing I'm concerned about is that our operatives or the council's operatives who are actually putting this application on don't appear to have any training. No training in the use of it correctly or safely, but certainly no training in what they're spraying. And it's the target is whatever lives, basically, which we can't continue like this.
Richard, do you want to add anything to that? Bring anything in different?
Yeah, I mean, I can add a few things to that. I mean, regarding Yatton, I want to say that so in the past, North Somerset Council used to do 2 spray-ins a year, and some time ago they reduced that to 1. And at that point, Yatton Parish Council picked up the burden and decided that they would do the 2nd spray each year. Well, it was, I think, end of last year, sometime like that, there was a Yatton Parish Council meeting of which several of us attended, and we did persuade Yatton Parish Council to stop using this weed killer in our streets. And they agreed for at least 12 months not to, and to see what happened, and to maybe even take a lead from North Somerset Council to see if they were going to still be spraying it. So we have had some success. We've reduced it down from both North Somerset Council and Yatton Parish Council spraying to now only North Somerset Council. Following up on what Hickey's been saying, I think that we all know now that it's absolutely proven to be harmful to bees. What they're spraying, the chemical they're spraying is glyphosate, and it's proven to be harmful to bees. It's probably harmful to other insects and wildlife, and in some countries it's been banned for it's extremely likely it's causing cancer in humans, although that's, just like there's climate change deniers, there's people denying about causing cancer in humans from glyphosate. So there is still a little bit of debate about that, but it's getting more and more conclusive. So this is quite dangerous stuff they're spraying around. And I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit here, because the comments about the safety gear that the operators are wearing. Now, my background is horticulture. I used to work in horticulture. I used to use glyphosate. I've gone out and sprayed it myself. And I know that the important thing is to follow the label instructions. The label instructions do not say that the operator has to wear any safety equipment. They have to wear gloves when handling a concentrate or any contaminated surfaces, but they don't have to. So they're not actually breaking rules. When they sprayed in strong wind, they were breaking rules, yes. I've previously seen them spraying on a showery day. That's against the label instructions. And what's even worse is the end of my street, right at the end of my street, I'm in a cul-de-sac, and there's a reed that actually feeds water into the triple SI. The label says that you can't spray next to a watercourse unless you've consulted the Environment Agency first. I've tried to find out if they consulted the Environment Agency. I haven't had an answer. This ream, they're spraying within inches of the top of the ream on a windy day. Inevitably, some of it goes in there. What does the label say? This product is harmful to aquatic life. It's running, that ream runs water to the triple SI, and it's a triple SI because of the aquatic life in the ditches. So North Somerset Council are paying a contractor to spray chemicals in a ream that runs into the triple SI, and where it runs into the triple SI, it's owned, that bit of land is the Strawberry Line, which is owned by North Somerset Council. You couldn't make it up.
Well, at this point, I think it would be wise to bring in councillor from Portishead, from South Ward, Peter Burden. Now, Peter, before you start speaking, I can give some background on you, because not only are you a councillor here in Portishead, but you're also a smallholder. So a little bit like Richard, you will have perhaps been using these products from time to time on your land. I'm not sure whether you do or not, but you'll might have some experience of that, but you've got tremendous experience of this within council, because I believe you sit on the scrutiny panel that deals with this.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Chris. On the high side of what I've heard from both Richard and Hickey, and I wish I'd heard it yesterday, because today we had a scrutiny panel meeting to ratify the outcome of that weekday we had. And the outcome of that weekday is the council members, and I believe the officers as well, intend to reduce where possible, or set ourselves on a path to reduce the use of glyphosate weed killer, or what are the point, any pesticides that are unnecessary. And the whole purpose of that weed day was to try and find a practical way of doing it. And we heard today from the representative of the contractors how better training's been given, better assurances are being given, and how the council is working with parish councils and local groups who don't want the spraying in their area to find another method of getting it done, of getting what is the vital weed control in some areas done without the use of weed killers. Now, what I've heard from two people tonight is directly contrary to what I've heard this afternoon.
Could I make a comment on that? Sorry to interrupt you, Peter. Just wanted to pick up on the fact you said you hadn't heard this, what I said. Now, I actually reported this to North Somerset Council and my two local councillors last week. I also know that 4 other people, local residents, reported it last week as well. And we received an email from our local councillor, I won't say a name here because I don't know if it's appropriate or not, saying that that our emails would be taken to that executive meeting today and used as evidence. So I'm absolutely shocked that you're sat there saying that, that hasn't happened, because we were assured that our voices would be heard, and it seems like they're not being heard. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to sort of put that in there.
Yeah,
because
no,
we have been assured.
it wasn't. Your issues were not raised today at all.
Whoa.
And one of your councillors chaired the committee.
Exactly. It wasn't him who actually gave me that email, but I knew he was chairing it. As I say,
yeah,
because the other issue with this, obviously we sit here from a wildlife point of view, but was the fact that it was being sprayed, blanket sprayed on a windy day next to a school when the children could be heard playing in the playground. Second to that, which is even worse, and I didn't see this myself, so I can only comment from a neighbour who informed me of this. I know they've also reported that same operative was blanket spraying outside of the school entrance as the junior and infant school children were leaving school on a windy day. As we know, some of these weed killers have been proven to be carcinogenic, and I can't say the one they're using is, but who's to say what health and safety implications are with that for our children, which becomes an even more important matter than what we're talking about here, wildlife. So the fact that our concerns, our shocked concerns, haven't been raised at that meeting, and the local council actually chaired that meeting. I emailed him direct, as I know other people did as well. So I'm shocked by that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it was not raised, and I think we were hitting on 2 points here, aren't we? One is the use of pesticides, which I think, as an individual, as a council, and as a country, I think we've actually got to minimise the use of pesticides where possible. And when used, they have to be used responsibly. And that, according to what I've just heard from you two people, is not happening. Now, I haven't witnessed this myself, but I can assure you I will raise it, as we were told today that extra training has been given, because this path the council set itself on is to reduce the amount of pesticide used and to look for far more targeted methods. At that weed day, Chris, you will remember they were talking about spot application. And that's really where you've got your weed, you put a little bit of foam on top. So there is no spray.
Yeah. So Pete, to go back to basics here, because there may be, if I remember rightly from the meeting, there was somebody from the council on that meeting who was actually giving a cost of, I mean, I was there representing the weeds, so I was sticking up for all.
Yeah.
So, but there was somebody from the council who's actually saying the cost to the council of the weeds, for instance, breaking through tarmac, breaking through that, so there is an issue. But the point is now, how do we go forwards and accept that there's a cost to the council? And if it's a cost to council, it's a cost to us. So how do we go forwards and minimize the effects on wildflowers? I'm not going to call them weeds, wildflowers and insects at the same time. How do we do this?
Yeah, I think you can actually use the word weed in some places, Chris, because a weed is a plant in the wrong place. And if it's growing in a drainage gully, like if that drainage gully is blocked, houses get flooded, I think it's the duty of the council to clear it. And I think that is genuinely a weed. When the councils have treated margins in the past, and we've had bowling greens outside of schools and other buildings, that I think is going far too far. And I don't think we need that type of management. But for straight road gullies, I think the council has to do something. And what it should do is do it in the most environmentally sound way.
Yep, can I interject here? And like I said, I used to work in horticulture, and I'm aware of looking at big pictures when you're looking at land management, weed management, that kind of thing. And what I said at that meeting, which hasn't been listened to yet, but it might be eventually, is that the problem is the overall management of our streets.
Yep.
So here in Yatton, we've got a lot of green areas, a lot of grass. Now, on a monthly basis, from March to October, the council come round with their grass cutting machine and they chop off every blade of grass and every wildflower, and they throw it all across the street and on the pavements, and it collects in the gutters, the road gutters. Now,
and then the seeds germinate.
The growers and gardeners listening will know that grass cuttings are a great mulch. You want something to grow, you surround it with a grass mulch. It conserves moisture and it rots down into a nice medium. It mixes with the leaves falling from the trees and the bits of twigs. It's wonderful. So on a monthly basis, the North Somerset Council contractors are mulching our weeds and helping them to grow. And then
this came out.
Can I interject there as well, Peter, and just say that it's also, when they do that and they leave the clippings, I can tell you as a father, it's a pain in the backside on playing fields because the grass ends up on our carpet.
Yeah. It's got to be, and it's one bit which impressed me from this weed day, Chris. Now, whether it finds its way through into the contract or the way officers actually work, but Annemieke White, the executive member, has taken on board and wants to try and come away with a more holistic approach to street management. A point Richard made, if you put grass clippings on the side of the road, that's going to fill up the gutters with, as he said, mulch, which is going to cause a phenomenal crop of weeds.
Yeah, and then
is to pick up the grass clipping.
Yeah, and then when I've raised a complaint to the council on the council website through their complaints process about the grass cutting and making a mess and mulching the weeds, and I've also complained about weed killer. Now, what I've been told about the grass mulch is doesn't matter. It's going to decompose. It's going to disappear. And when I complained about the weed killer, part of a long response I've got said that this weed killer can take up to 4 weeks to work. And do you know what they did in Yatton this year? 2 days after they sprayed it, they came around with a street sweeper and they ripped the tops of the leaves off of a lot of the plants.
Yeah.
These weeds that need 4 weeks to die for that weed killer to work down into the roots. They've ripped the leaves off to prevent that happening.
Yep.
Can I come in there? I see part of this problem is that the contractors that the council use, and I've used for many years, seem to be clueless in looking after our natural environment. And I would suggest, I don't know, but I would suggest that there's a distinct lack of training and understanding what's required by those contractors, operatives. Now, what does the council do to vet candidates? Would they look into the contractor to see what sort of training it gives its operatives? Because currently their operatives are free to do exactly what they want, whether it be a windy day, a still day, whether they blanket spray, whether they smoke, whatever they do. And, you know, from my observations, there's got to be a better way. I'd like to just jump in with an example on Facebook recently, which I believe it was Surrey Council or a council in Surrey, and they actually posted up a lovely picture of some bee orchids. And the statement said, our mowing team have been out today and come across these very rare bee orchids. So they've mowed around them and left them, taken a photograph and recorded where they are. Now, if Surrey Council can do that, why can't North Somerset do that? Are our operatives got such have they got such a lack of knowledge of nature and wild plants, which effectively they're trying to eradicate? You know, that they can't do this, and surely training has to be a big thing in this. You know, whether that's training through the council or whether it's training through the contractor itself. But the council should be, you know, are responsible for their actions by association. Yet, in the you're employing them. Having said that, with taxpayers' money, you know, and a lot of which is being wasted on this, really. But I do wonder about the training issue.
Yeah, I'm no apologist for the way things are run, and I think you probably overestimate the role an individual councillor can have. But from the plus side, North Somerset has some exceptionally well managed grass verges. We've got nationally recognised grass verges in North Somerset that are managed appropriately by agreements, in most cases, with volunteers. And these were found, in some cases, 25, 30 years ago.
Yep.
And it's individuals like Bob Buckinpill in Eastern Ingledino and the Long Ashton Bypass. These have been found, recorded and managed. And I think now there is a goodwill in North Somerset that if local groups want to come forward with suggestions for management in their areas, I think there is now the pipeline to get it done.
Oh, I've got to jump on this because I'm sorry, but Yatwag in particular, Yatwag have over 30 years of experience in local conservation, and they have offered their services and their experience and their knowledge to North Somerset Council on numerous times. When I was on the Yatwag committee, be that 10 years ago or so, we were trying to engage North Somerset Council then, and North Somerset Council completely blanked us. They're not interested in engaging with local groups. We've got lots and lots of amazing conservation groups in North Somerset, this part of North Somerset. We got Bet in Backwell, we got Newts in Knowsley, we got Friends of Trendlewood Park, we got St George's Flower Bank. I could go on. There's lists and lists.
Don't forget us. Hey, come on. Don't forget
and of course, you know, Portishead as well. You know, there's these amazing groups, and many of us have tried to engage North Somerset Council, and it's fallen on deaf ears. I've done it from a Yatwag point of view. I did it when I was running North Somerset Nature Net, which was a network to collect these groups together and assist them. And I've done it on a personal note by emailing my local councillors on more than one occasion, probably a dozen occasions in total. I'm sure they think I'm a pain in the backside, but it's something I really care about. And all I ask is some engagement to actually talk and discuss this, because at the moment we are being totally ignored. However, if I was to complain that I wanted some grass cut, I'm sure they'd come straight round and cut it down to a millimetre long. You know, I mean, if you look at our grass verges in Yatton, certainly in May, may I remind you, and may I also say that, you know, North Somerset Council support rewilding. They were, our green spaces in Yatton were actually mowed 3 times during May. So, you know.
Everything said there, Higgy, Jonathan and I have experienced. So Jonathan and I are very familiar with this, aren't we, Jonathan? Are you still there, or where have you gone?
That's all right. I'm backstage. I'm just listening. I'm just doing all the admin backstage at the moment. So,
but I mean, this thing about communications is a real big issue. I mean, So much so that you know, I'll say this little story again, but you know, I had a protected bird which was nesting in a local cemetery, and I contacted my ward councillor, who will remain nameless, and asked if basically we could get North Somerset to just back off away from the nest. And unfortunately, my ward councillor didn't even get a response for, I think it must have been about 8 weeks or so, but we got the dates down. But you know, it is the communications issue is absolutely atrocious. And when we were going through the whole rewilding thing, I've got to say, Higgy, Jonathan and I back you up to the hill, because we were blanked. That was it. We were out of it. And I actually had a third party say to me, basically, you're a troublemaker. You criticize. And I said, no, I don't criticize. I come up with say what's wrong, and here's the solution. And this is how much it could potentially save the taxpayers. Come on, this is common sense. Anyway, come on, Peter, you got to answer.
Can I put a question to Higgy? Was he around when the Agenda 21 process started?
Was I around? Yeah, I lived in North Somerset my whole life. I grew up in Backwell, and I've been in Yatton for 35 years.
Yeah, because the Agenda 21 process and the work then that was done by Yatwag in consultation with and working with the council, I thought was an exemplar of how things should happen. The trouble is that was 25 years ago. I think we've got to find a way of getting back to that, where local groups can work with council officers.
The issue is we're trying as Yatwag. I'm vice chair of Yatwag. Yatwag is trying, and it's tried and tried. Yatton Churchyard, it's a closed churchyard, it's the responsibility of the council. We find orchids in there, and we have to physically put cages around them, and we're told, that we'll let them flower, but we'll have to chop them off because we can't let them seed. There's an area where there's a sign up saying it's been left for wildlife. Last year, and possibly this year, I'm not sure, but certainly last year, it had a lot of garlic mustard in it, and it was covered in orange-tip butterflies. They lay their eggs. It got to a point that flowers had finished, and those butterflies and caterpillars have got to go through their life cycle. What did North Somerset Council do? They went in and slashed the lot. The butterflies have gone. So that's all right then. Well, hold on a minute. Those caterpillars have got to do their stuff to get to the stage before you cut them off. And there's actually a sign saying managed for wildlife, but it wasn't managed for wildlife. It was managed so it attracted the butterflies in to lay their eggs and then destroyed it. So actually it was anti-wildlife, because it would have been better to have cut it more often and not let it flower, to not attract the butterflies in to lay their eggs. It was the absolute opposite of what needed to be done.
So what you're saying, in a nutshell, is you want some way locally of having some influence of what happens in your ward.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
we have the
this
same
is
problem on
the bit
we have the same problem on the Strawberry Line. The same things happen on Cadbury Hill. All those things locally, and we try.
This is something I think we've lost. Becoming a unitary council. There used to be a regular area committees of the old Woodspring District Council. There were area committees looking after things like planning and other local issues. Now, there are 3, for an ordinary councillor, we've got 3 scrutiny panels a year where these type of matters can be raised. And I really think we've got to find some way, and I've got some suggestions to chat over with Chris for a cemetery in Portishead in the future, but we've got to find some way of getting local people who, after all, pay their taxes locally to get the type of management they want. Some areas, I will accept, need to be done like a bowling green, namely a bowling green. The rest can be managed in different ways. And we've just got to find a way of getting the council to do it. But at the moment, I've been back on North Somerset now for just over a year, and I'm finding it extremely difficult to even make contact with the relevant people, let alone find a way of changing the policy.
And I think that's the problem, that even if we have a local councillor who listens, that local councillor is not in charge of the contractor. So the local councillor might agree with us, but the contractors actually seem to be in charge. Somebody's throwing some money at them and saying, there you are, go and do it. And then it feels like they're doing whatever they want. The contractors are leading the council.
Is there any merit here in all of us? I mean, a little bit like the weed meeting, but allowing the local groups, if you like, and the local enthusiasts to have a little bit more control on the meeting, but get us all together and actually doing something which prior to 2019 was suggested at Portishead Town Council. And that was basically we, as in Jonathan and myself and other interested parties, sit down around a table with the contractors and with councillors, and we work up a plan, which is basically for our local area. We look at each area and we just say when things should be cut, when things shouldn't be cut, what we need to do about this, what are the pitfalls about what we suggest, because we're quite prepared to and open-minded to say, okay, yeah, we agree, we can't do that there. There's a really good reason why we can't. Yeah. But Peter, is there any mechanism within the district council where we could get us all together in some kind of conference, forum, symposium, or whatever?
There isn't one at the moment, Chris. No. Whether we can come up with a way of doing it, or whether it's a straightforward question to ask. I'm trying this with the Environment Agency on various work, but just to get hold of the maintenance specification that goes out to the contractor, so that we know what the specification is for an area and can try and influence it that way. It's something that if there's a will to promote something and people are interested, I'll do my best to get it to the head. I actually rate the executive member for environment and the executive member for transport, neither of which are my party, but I rate them that they want to do a good job. And I think if there's a ground force wanting local influence, we'll have a go at getting it.
Yeah.
I can't promise anything, but as far as the weed killers are concerned, I think people are getting far too hooked on what the council use. The two examples that worry me rigid, and around Yatton, there are 2 or 3 farmers who grow a lot of wheat. That wheat goes to Portbury for animal feed. That wheat on regular years, when it is bad autumn, is sprayed with glyphosate prior to harvest. Now, if you're worried about something being a health hazard, personally, I'm a lot more worried about what I put into my mouth than what ends up on my boot. So it's a matter of scale. And the other issue we've got with glyphosate, I'm vice chairman of the drainage board for North Somerset, and we've got a particularly invasive weed, waterweed, which if it gets out of control, half of Weston-super-Mare is going to get wet, extremely wet. And the only way we can find of controlling this floating pennywort is through the use of glyphosate. Now, that has to be put into perspective. If you look at the graph for the amount of glyphosate the district council's used over the last 10 years, it has gone down dramatically to virtually nothing in comparison. So I think you're winning an argument there in a lot of cases. What you've now got to do is make sure the contractors obey the rules they're given. But the other issues, I think we've got a real problem. How do we cope with it? I wish it was as simple as just saying, don't use these things. In my own case, I had a gravel drive. I've just spent a few £1,000 on getting a load of new gravel on it. And I've treated myself to a weed burner, which is a darn sight easier to use than spraying it once every few months. And I think more environmentally sound.
Does it work?
Yeah. But whether the council, it worked. It's worked for a year at the moment.
Right, so I'm going to answer that. Does it work? So there's 2 things here.
Yes.
So first of all, what Peter said about farmers using glyphosate. Just because they're using it, if it's wrong, doesn't mean the council should use it. Let's sort the council out, okay? Because we know it's harming bees. The council's declared some sort of a biodiversity emergency. I can't remember the wording, but they have. So let's stop them using it. Does it work? Well, they spray it. The reason they spray it on wheat is to dry the wheat out, because it works really well on grasses, and wheat is a grass. Now, I said my background was horticulture, and I used to use this stuff. I was a farm manager on a soft fruit farm on the Isle of Grain in Kent. Before I used it, before I used a weed killer, I'd go out into the field and have a look, see what weeds that were there. If I'd gone in the field with any broadleaf weeds and sprayed it with only glyphosate, my employer would have had serious words with me for wasting his money. Glyphosate works really well on grasses, but most broadleaf weeds, it doesn't work very well at all. Remember what I told you, that for the last many years, the streets of Yatton, until this year, they've been sprayed twice a year with glyphosate. But they grow an awful lot of weeds. So ask yourself, did it work? If you've done it twice a year for the last however many years, 10, I don't know, 10, 20 years, whatever, and you're still growing all those weeds, has it worked? Of course it hasn't. Glyphosate is rubbish at killing broadleaf weeds. So let's tell the council to stop using it, because it's not working. Doesn't matter if you've got an alternative. There's no point in spending our money on a product that doesn't work, not harm bees, and probably gives us cancer.
Well, there's an experiment going on at the moment in Portishead.
I was just going to say that.
On the St. Peter's Road, where they're trying manual treatment, manual clearing with the locals on volunteers. Portishead High Street is dealt with by the volunteers of Portishead in Bloom, doing it by hand. If we can find groups of volunteers to take over. But on the other side, you see, Richard, I get complaints from both sides. I'm totally in support of your aim, but I get complaints from other side that the gullies are full up with growing weed and people are going to get wet.
And
but spraying them with a weed killer that doesn't kill them, that knocks them back temporarily, why is that an answer? Why is it not? Why not just, well, why not stop mulching them and then start mechanically removing them with the street sweeper a bit more often? Save the money on the weed killer, save the money on the mulching, and spend that money on the street sweeper. There's your answer.
Can I jump in and say that you know, I think I said this at the weed meeting. When we were kids, you know, our parents used to take us down to the street side, and it would be like a family outing to go and with the trowel and get rid of everything, and you'd see people up and down the road doing it. And what we've lost is a little bit of perspective. And I've said this before, and people get upset when I say it, but you know, at times we seem to want councils to change our napping for us. You know, if we're able to do it, just get out and do it.
Here we go, Chris. Here we go. Viewer Rosie says, if people kept their properties weeds down on the boundary of the pavement, would the council still spray there? The moss on the pavement under our hedge is brown and dead.
If everybody did it, and there will be people who won't physically be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where you need your local community spirit. Get people who are able to come along and say, that's okay, no problem, I'll do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
But before we can do these things, we need the engagement from the council, and that's what we're missing, the engagement. And as I say, the training, you know, maybe that training could come from groups such as Yatwag and Bet and yourselves, but you need that engagement, agreement and engagement from the council first. And you know, Peter hit it on head, really. We all need to get round table and work something out, because you know there is some pros for using weed killers. You know, Japanese knotweed for one, you wouldn't eradicate it without it, but it's injected directly into the stems or roots. You know, so there are applications, the same as your aquatic problem down on the drains, and that's perfectly acceptable. There are some situations we may need to use it. However, it's the misuse of the product which is the real concern, and that's where the training comes in. Whether that's training the contracts pay for, whether the council gives it, whether the council invite local experts to come and give that training, I don't know, but there needs to be an even playing field where everyone comes together and actually discusses a way forward, because there is arguments in all directions, obviously.
Jonathan,
I'm listening. I'm in the background. I'm doing technical stuff. I'm adjusting audio levels and things. So yeah, no, I absolutely agree. We've got to wean ourselves off of this stuff, I think is my take on it. And I agree with what Higgy said, is that there are going to be instances where some kind of spot, and I don't want to use the word surgical, but yeah, it's almost like it's a surgical application of a weed killer to take something out. But this, like I say, the experience I had a few weeks ago of the guy in the quad bike going up and down the pavement, just blasting everything, including in just off the side of my drive, I've got some Mexican fleabane, which is actually on my drive. No, it's all gone now. It's just been wiped out completely. And there were instances, I know there was some chat in the Aquag group about residents in Yatton and Congersbury losing stuff in their gardens because the weed application, the weed killer rather, well, it was just so arbitrary. And this comes down to training. And as you said, Chris, we've sat in on meetings where we've tried to kind of not influence, but we've tried to just have an engagement with officers to say, is there a way that you can do this slightly differently? And we've just come up against a brick wall.
Well, that brick wall, Jonathan, is really worrying to me, because today we had the person in charge of the contract there telling us that he is actively seeking to work with local groups to find local solutions to carry out the council's wish, which is to reduce to zero over time the use of glyphosate. Now, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, I heard one thing, and at 8 o'clock tonight, I've heard another.
So what's causing that impasse then?
I think there's a large number of walls put up in the authority, and I think councillors are finding it extremely difficult to get through those walls, because the executive member responsible for this is a new councillor. Her heart is totally in the right place, and she is working herself. And if her wishes aren't finding their way through to the contractors, there is something wrong with the way that democracy is working.
Mm-hmm.
And
you say
I don't know how to.
You say a new officer.
I don't know how we go about sorting it out. Something has to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You say a new officer is in charge, which is great for this particular thing.
No, not a new officer. I said a new executive member.
A new executive member. Okay, sorry. But this is historic. This is going back 10 years, 12 years that we've been trying to engage the council, and the council will not engage. They will not answer emails. If you do get an answer, it's a generic answer. Which I certainly, when I reported the weed killer incident last week, it was a generic answer that I actually compared with 4 other people, and they had exactly the same answer, word from word. Yeah. And it didn't actually answer our concerns. So it is this engagement, and I say it's not a new thing. This is historic as far as I'm concerned. 12 years or so.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that at all. I just want to know how we can get it back, because my real working power of the district council is back and stopped at about 2005. And then I believe we had good engagement with people, worked well with local groups, and things like the Agenda 21 movement, which was basically act locally to get things done at a grassroots level. And that's how I've always believed things should work. But the the structure for making it work has been dismantled over the last 20 years.
You've just described the foundations of Wild Portishead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, have you got any comments to bring in?
Olwyn says, I would suggest if anyone sees them spraying, firstly, film it if what they're doing is illegal. And secondly, go and stand in their way if the spray might go where it shouldn't. So they have to stop.
I've done that. I've done that.
My
Chris, I was going to say you've got a classic example of this, which is the bee orchids outside of not bee orchids, the bees outside Gordano School.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to remind people of that particular story?
Well, there's 3 species which I monitor every spring there. So the yellow-legged mining bee, the ashy mining bee, and the early mining bee. And it's an area which I've got to say has not been sprayed. And I think it's one where the council have not just got it right, but as Councillor Burden knows full well, there were several stops and starts to that. But generally got it right, and if I've got to say, probably got it too right. So there's a bits of that now which have reached a point whereby we could say, guys, this is what we need to do. We need to actually do something, because there's parts of it where they've just done nothing, and so we need to just bring it back a bit. But that's the bit that I think everybody's agreed on that's here tonight is needed. It's that local conversation where we've got that opportunity to say, look, I've got this special area. I mean, and the area that you're talking about could be potentially as good as Mr. Buck's area up at Eastern Ingordano. It could be just as good as that. But so it's not sprayed. We haven't got a spraying issue there. We probably used to have an issue of spraying. The biggest issue there was that just as the bees got going, they would do their first cuts through there and just
that's what I was referring to. Yeah,
they would obliterate every single hole. So we got that stopped. We got that first cut stopped. Now they just cut the bit right down by the path itself, but the rest of it's left. The thing is now that the cherry trees have now started seeding along, and what we need to do is bring that back, and we can bring it back. And I think, to take a leaf out of what Councillor Burden said this evening, what we could actually bring it back with is local people doing it. And it wouldn't be a hard management all in one go. We could do little bits at a time and then come back to it. We could almost have a rotational type management taking place. And it's not a big area. So it's perfectly achievable.
Well, you could also involve the school as well, couldn't you?
Yeah, I tried that. I went to the school. They've got an eco group. But unfortunately, there were health and safety risks. And that's when it all went. It's that old thing again, that health and safety.
Richard and Higgy, I got a question for you. Is that I was on the strawberry line in your neck of the woods today because I did Yatton to Congsbury, which I do quite a bit. How do you manage that stretch without using weed killer? Which I know you don't use it, but how do you manage that? What challenges are there in keeping that maintained?
Okay, I can answer that. So Yankwake looks after from Yatton Station Car Park up as far as towards the A370. Yatton is responsible for the management of that, the wildlife aspect of it, and the vegetation in agreement with North Somerset Council. So we're not responsible for the track itself, but either side. Now, and the agreement is that in the autumn/winter each year, we give it quite a hard cut. The farmer comes in as a contractor with his flail and he knocks brambles back, and each year it's slightly different. It's a bit of an ad hoc basis. So to try to allow some succession, and some areas a bit more wild than others, and that's done. And then on top of that, the council used to cut once a year, just around early July, beginning of school holidays, about a metre strip either side of the part of the track itself. And that's the only management that happens. And again, you know, on an ad hoc basis, Yakba cleans out sections of ditches, or if an area of the scrub is becoming too dense, it is thinned out, but that's the only management. Although I will say there is sometimes an issue with the encroachment of the vegetation onto the path, that creep. And I know several years ago, there was one section, well, I'm not sure, I assume it was the council, but they did physically scrape back some vegetation off of the track. That may not have been the council, it may have been sustenance or volunteers, someone like that, but that was done.
I mean, this was a photograph that I took today. This is just literally outside. This is as you go underneath the art sculpture and you start heading out onto the path itself. So you've left Yatton Station. And my friend Alan and I, we just had to stop and marvel at this because it is just absolutely stunning here.
So is that the sort of triangular bit on the right hand side, just after the arch?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that area gets trimmed by the contractors normally around October time, once a year, and then raked that area. So, and now all those wildflowers. Now, if Tony or Faith Million was here, they would be able to tell you they have done wildflower counts in there. And it's astonishing how many kinds of wildflower there are in there. But that section is cut and raked once a year, and that's the only management that has. Last year, at the time the contractors were around to trim it, there were still too many flowers and too many insects on them, and we told them not to, and we actually had it cut by the farmer in the winter, and then again, but the contractors did rake it for us. And that is the only management. And actually, it's really good you mention that, because what I think, and this is me speaking as an individual, not on behalf of Yatton, but what I look at some of the areas of Yatton, some of our green spaces, where we don't see children playing on them, they're just green spaces. They get scalped monthly by the contractors, and there's absolutely zero value to the community, zero value to wildlife. Why can't some of those green areas within our villages be cut once a year, just like this, and have the grass cuttings picked up? Because eventually, and it would take time, but eventually they would head in this direction. And wouldn't that be wonderful for us and our wildlife?
Yep. No, absolutely. Chris, in this photograph, just talk us through what you can see in this photograph here. Because I think we've got some willow herb in the distance. I think it's I think that's probably great hairy willow herb, the little purpley pink you can see in the distance. But what have we got? What have we got going on here?
I can't. The picture's not big enough. I need it much bigger than that.
Okay.
Go get my binoculars if you like.
Let me try doing there we go. How's that working for you?
That's pretty good.
Yep.
There's the thing that's interesting me is the grasses.
Yep.
And that's basically because Yatwag is very famous for the work that it's done on the barn owls. Now, here's another area that predators can coexist perfectly there with the insects here. So what I like about that is it's thick, it's wild. The other thing I must say about it is that if you look around the whole country, you've got an awful lot of councils trying to produce wildflower areas, and it's probably costing them a bomb. What I've always said, and this is the thing then about the verge outside Gordano School that we've been talking about, what I've always said is trust the seed bank, trust what's there already, trust what's been suppressed. And I know from the verge at Gordano School that the number of wildflowers is just expanding constantly. I mean, Yatwag won't plant anything in these areas, will it, boys?
No. I just jump in on that and say it's letting what grows naturally in that area grow. And the reason being is that our insects that live in that environment will have certain plants that they rely on. So if you took the elephant hawk moth, for example, it would lay its eggs on the caterpillar food plant, and that caterpillar food plant is, of course, the willow herb. If you look at the ragwort, it's the only food plant of the cinnabar moth caterpillar. And the caterpillar has evolved to actually absorb the poisons, the toxins out of the ragwort and use it as a defense mechanism against predators. So actually what grows naturally in your area is the most important plants. And most of those things are things that we as gardeners, those of us who are gardeners, not myself included, but many, consider as weeds. But really, they're the most important plants there for our pollinators. Going back to the elephant hawk moth, if it flies into your garden, the adult moth, and it can't find some willow herb, it will quite happily lay its eggs on your lovely prize fuchsias, because the caterpillar will eat your fuchsias. But it's only doing that because we've eradicated willow herb out of our gardens. If you were allowed a bit of willow herb to grow, maybe not in your borders, but in a pot at the bottom of the garden, you'd probably find the elephant hawk moth would actually ignore your fuchsias, and you could almost use it as a companion plant. So we need to be thinking more cleverer as gardeners, and many of our so-called weeds, if you like, we could be using as companion plants to protect our cultivated plants. And so willow herb's just a very good example of that. So when we try to let these wildflower verges grow, it's allowing, as Chris says, what would be naturally in that seed bank, which would naturally grow there. And there is a village quite close to us who has an amazing wildflower show, and it's bright and breezy, but actually a lot of the plants aren't particularly native, and although they will probably provide nectar for the adult insects, it's not actually creating any food plants for the caterpillars. And this is the key thing, it's the food plants for the caterpillars which are important. It's not necessarily the nectar plants we're looking at these food plants. So in conservation, stuff like your ragwort, your willow herb, your bramble, your nettles, and many others are really important, because and your grass species as well, your meadow grass species, because so many of our moths and caterpillars, our hoverflies, our sawflies, all use a particular plant, a particular grass to feed their caterpillars. So what naturally occurs is what we need to try and aspire to.
Higgy, can you just explain to, or perhaps you and Richard could explain to some of the viewers, there was an area on the strawberry line that was scraped towards the end of last year and then allowed to do its thing. So what can you say about that particular section? I'm trying to find a picture of it.
I'll let Richard answer it, because I'm not actually actively involved in that work at the moment, but he'll tell you.
Yeah, okay, so there's an area of the strawberry line a little bit further up than the area that you were talking about earlier, Jonathan.
Yeah.
As you go up the strawberry line, it was on the left-hand side.
That's it.
Which had become very thick with scrub. It was difficult to manage. Historically, the IDB used to dredge the ditch, and they created a big bund next to the strawberry line. And what happened was that the actual track had ended up down in this gully with a bund either side. And this is one of the few occasions. So this is an example of what happens when people will work with the local group. So what happened here was there was some funding available for nature reserves, which I think originated from National Grid for the work for the pilots going through. And so Yagweg had long wanted to do something with that area to improve it. And because the track was in a bit of a gully, it was very wet, and it was in the winter, it was horrible. It was the worst section of the whole section of the cycle path. So a plan was put together to improve the track bed and also do something with the scrub. So what happened was, first of all, Yagweg got the contractor in, and he flailed down all of the scrub. Then I believe it was the IDB sent their machine in, and they levelled that big bund, and that's when it was levelled out. Then Yagweg got the farmer back in, and he worked the ground a bit. And then actually, this is one of the very rare cases, there was a bit of a wildflower meadow mix sown in there. I'm not sure how much of it's germinated, but it's a combination of what was sown and what was in the seed bank already has come back up. I think just once we've had volunteers go through it and snip off some brambles that were growing. and that might be something that has to be done in the future. But already this year, the first year, so it was only done less than 12 months ago, and the first year, it's already looking great, and it's such a resource for those insects and butterflies.
Yeah, I'm just bear with me a second, folks. I'm just going to bring up some photographs that I took at the beginning of the year. Here we go. Share screen. It's all right. It's this stupid system of trying to. Oh goodness me. Bear with, folks. It's just very technical to try and get images up sometimes. Chrome tab. Here we go. There's the signage. So this was. I can tell you when this was. This was in. I think this is February this year. But that was the area that has been. That was all kind of cut down and, sown and everything. And that's just the signage there. So there we go. Watch this space. Volunteers have cleared and seeded this area. In the coming years, we hope to see more butterflies and bees on the wild flowers here. So this, I'll try and find a kind of before and after pics, but what it is now is absolutely brilliant, and it's a really good example of what can be done with careful and sensitive planning. And all power to Yakwag for getting this done, because, like I say, you see it now, it is absolutely stunning. And I'm just going to see if I can find a picture of it.
And just say that will also get cut and raked at least once a year at the end of the season, probably October time. It will get cut and raked every year. And what that does, by cutting and raking it, it takes nutrients out.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you cut it and let it rot back down and go back in, you keep the nutrients. But as you take the nutrients out, it weakens the grasses. You get different kinds of grasses come in, and it allows more wildflowers to come in. It doesn't cut and rake, which is important. It's a bit like old-fashioned hay cut very late in the season, which is how Yakwag manages at least some of its reserves.
Yeah.
Doesn't that take it so full circle, guys? Because the emphasis of there is that you've got a local group dealing with a local area that's enthused about a local area, and that can muster local support and get them out on the ground doing the work at the right time, and it's all planned and it all goes back local.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Chris. And the interesting thing is that Yakwag is one example. I mean, I think Yakwag is one of the older sort of independent conservation groups in the area. But as I alluded to earlier, every single village in North Somerset has some sort of group doing exactly this or something similar. Many of those groups share information, they share resources, and they share training at certain times. So there is this huge resource out there which could be tapped into. You can volunteer on a local level, you can volunteer on a slightly wider level, but yeah, it is key to keeping our countryside where it needs to be, really. And the interesting thing for me, you look at that work that Yakwag's done there, and I look at the green barren grass areas around the village itself, inside the village. They could look just like that. You can still mow the edges of the pavements to keep their pavements clear. You can even mow a series of pathways through, so actually give someone a bit of an adventure as they walk along, while supporting our insects. And at the moment, we're not doing that. We just got flat, bowling green grass everywhere around the Atton, everywhere is mown. I know some people like that. They like the tidy look, but we have to look beyond that now, because climate change, we are in a real crisis as far as insects go. As I said earlier, I keep records of my own garden, and my records are down at least 70% on insects this year, and butterflies no doubt are 90%, if not more. So we need more of these spaces, but not only on reserves such as the railway line and Yakwag's other 10 or 11 reserves. We need them in our villages as well, because our villages, the inside of our villages, are becoming barren. They're becoming barren. We've had, I'm not sure the figure, but somewhere in the region of 1,000 to 2,000 houses built in Yatton, around Yatton. All of those, or most of those, are built on greenfield sites. The gardens are so small that they're put down to plastic grass. So we're losing so much habitat, we have to claw some back. And those big green spaces in Yatton are areas where we could claw some back and actually try and bring the insects and the wildlife back into the village, you know. And that's to the benefit of our children as well. I'm very fortunate. I'm involved in a project with Yatwag at the moment, which is educating some of our young people about wildlife, and we're involved in the project with Congsbury Youth Club. But sadly, we did a bug hunt with them back in June, and we found 12 insects. And the sad bit for me is the children were absolutely elated that we found 12 insects. But I know from my past experience, we should have found 50 times that. You know, we should have found hundreds of insects. And our children are seeing this huge decline of insects as the norm, and we've got to stop that, because how can we pass on this mess to the next generation if they don't actually understand what it should look like? You know, and these green spaces in our village are a way to do that, I think, and engage as well.
And sorry, Higley, but it's not difficult to bring that back. I'm fortunate enough that my garden will be back onto some fields, but both my front garden is almost all of it, and it's very small. The part I don't park the car on is only about 3 meters square, but I haven't cut the grass since March. It's full of grasshoppers, and because I do it and again I cut it at the end of the year, and I remove the grass cuttings, and it's getting more wildflowers in it as I do that each year. In the back garden, I've got an area, a part of my lawn. Of course, I want part of my lawn cut so I can, you know, put the chair out on it and sit out in the sun. But part of it is left uncut, hasn't been cut since March. We sat there the other day, we spotted a shrew. We get slow worms. In the past, we've had grass snakes. You know, it's not difficult. It's not rocket science.
Yeah,
That's,
you're talking there about nature recovery in action.
Yeah.
And the buzzword from government has been about nature recovery, and literally millions of pounds thrown at nature recovery. And you look at some of these things, and I'm going to take a leaf here out of Jonathan's book. Most of them are tick box operations. They're not actually doing the things on the ground. It goes back to local. Have we still got Peter with us?
No, he's disappeared for some reason. So that's all we've got at the moment.
All right, that's a shame, because I mean it brings it all back again to the basics of how do we get from where we are now to a point whereby we're all looking after our own areas, and what we need is, well, again, it goes back to 2019, what I said to Portishead Town Council at the time. And the thing is, why I wanted Peter there was that he was the one that said it as a councillor at the time. And that is that when I was coming up with all these ideas of a ground up approach, council was confused. You could see them all looking at each other. And it was Peter that actually turned around and said, well, there's not a lot council can do, but what council can do is facilitate it. And boom, that was when the other councillors basically looked around and said, yes, we can. So he's back. Peter's back. So Peter, can we get to that stage? And can you be a champion of that to get North Somerset to that stage?
I'll do my best, Chris. It's a lot harder than it ever was, because there's less councillors now and there's less involvement with councillors and officers. But if we can put our head together and come up with an idea, I'll willingly have a go.
You've already mentioned,
I believe it works.
Yeah, you've already mentioned that you've got an executive councillor who's new, who's really enthusiastic, who really wants to make that difference. Is there any chance you could set up a meeting between us, you, and that executive councillor?
I'm sure I could. Whether I tell her the names who want to meet her, she runs and past the officers first, I don't know, because you haven't got on well with officers, have you? But no, I think I raised an issue with her in council, and was quite blunt, and she ended up coming round really quite well. So I rate the woman. I think her heart is in the right place. But the problem you've got, I think, is a lot of new councillors took over about 8 years ago and haven't found a way of controlling the officers yet. I think the council's run magnificently by the officers, and members are a bit of an issue on the side. It just reminds me so much of how Avon County used to be.
Well, we're getting near to the end of the show, Jonathan. We've gone well over the hour.
We've gone well over the hour. I'm just gonna do a little bit of housekeeping here. I showed you earlier on what that strip on the Strawberry line looked like at the beginning of the year. This is what it looks like now.
Wow.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there today, and it was absolutely stunning. I've put photographs up on the Wild Portishead Facebook page. But all this willow, certainly there's lots of willow herb. There is lots of, God, brain gone again. God, I'm gonna have to look at my notes here. Yeah, lots of willow herb, lots of teasels. And this, you know, I'm sure the ACWAG guys will be able to explain how this was done. It was just cut down to scrape, and then you know, allowed to do its own thing, really, wasn't it?
That's right. And what we will find is when we cut and rake it once a year, every year, it will evolve. And for you know, for those people who have a little bit, you know, some of the people watching, for example, who might look at that and think it's only willow herb. Well, all of these things. One thing I had to learn when I came from horticulture and I moved out there, career change, and came to lived in Yatton and joined the ACWAG. And I remember going out into the field with Tony and Faith the first time they showed me a ACWAG reserve, and there was a patch that was full of thistles. And with my horticulture head on, I said, well, you're going to have to control them. Now, Tony and Faith politely ignored me because what we find is that over time, things even themselves out.
Yeah.
Eventually, those thistles disappeared. They didn't need to be cut, especially they didn't need to be sprayed. Some years we have thistles in our reserves and some years we don't. And actually, thistles are great because the butterflies and bees love them, but that's just an example. That year there was a lot of thistles in one patch and it was quite over the top, and I thought we were going to need to control them, but and all of our reserves, the reserves that we take an annual hay cut very late. There's something that Tony and Faith have said to me about consistent management doesn't achieve consistent results because these places, they evolve over time. And it will sort itself out to be sort of a natural process, and it will be much more mixed than that big bank of willow herb that you can see. It's going to take a little bit of patience, a little bit of time, but probably not that long.
I was going to say, Richard, there is a section just as you kind of come out of like a very shaded spot, and then as you're almost onto the road with Kongsbury, there is a great big long open section which a lot of years usually has lots of thistles growing there. But this year, and that obviously attracts goldfinch, but this year there's a lot of willow herb there. And that's interesting because it's going to be in educational to see how nature adapts to that. But yeah, it's honestly, you know, me and my friend Alan, we walk it a couple of times a month, and we've been cataloguing the changes that happen along that whole stretch between Yatton and Kongsbury.
Can I come in on the thistle?
Yeah.
The thistle, because there is a really important message with these thistles. I'm not sure if you realise, but Yatwag have recorded some red listed insects on their reserves, and the thistles that Richard talks about in particular are left for a reason on the 10-acre reserve, because there's actually a colony of horseflies on there, red-listed horseflies. It's a species called Atelotus rusticus, and it's basically a marsh specialist. And because the reserves are managed in an old-fashioned way, it's a bit of old marsh grazing countryside, really, which is left in those reserves. And this colony of very, very, very rare horseflies has managed to hang on there. So, what sometimes we call a weed, it is actually a really, really important plant in conservation. And going back to the verge where you've got the willow herb, which is dominant, when you sow a perennial wildflower mix, you very often get a dominant species within the first year or two, because many of our perennial flowers, when they germinate from seed, they will actually take 2 or 3, even 4 years to flower. So you often have one particular dominant species, but over time, that dominant species will die out to some degree, and the other wildflowers will come and make a much better species-rich meadow. So there is a reason why you get this domination from one species, and it's a very good reason why some people will actually sow an annual flower mix within a perennial meadow to get that first year of colour. But obviously, that's not appropriate in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Got a comment here from Dave White. Anybody who knows Dave White, he's an incredibly talented photographer. Dave says, North Somerset Council seems to have abandoned their rewilded areas, Welly Bottom, Slade Road School, etc. Can locals join with North Somerset Council to manage these areas? I think Chris and I would say that's a great idea, but Peter, I mean, that's one for you, really.
I think it's an excellent idea. I just think rewilding, I wasn't on the council at the time, I wasn't involved at the time, so hands up. But if ever there was an opportunity that wasn't handled properly, it was the entire rewilding side. It really should have started with local people. The trouble was, people from outside the district were employed to do a job, which they did, but they didn't know the local people on the ground and any of the background.
I think on that point, Chris, we will, because this is where we came in. I think we will wrap it up tonight. But Chris, do you want to get a plug in for that?
Oh yes, it's due out. It's due out the 12th of September, and we're going to try for a local launch. And Jonathan's actually in there. In chapter 8.
Good Lord.
Councillor Burden's in there in chapter 8, and so is our ex-MP, and I'm hoping that he will grace us by coming along. Because can you remember, Jonathan? He did say he wanted to swap books, didn't he?
He did. Yes. Yeah. We're going to hold him to that as well.
We're going to hold him to that. Yeah, definitely.
I'll give him a copy of my book as well. So.
Yeah. What's that?
I'll tell you about after the show. But
right.
That's
due out. It's available for pre-order now, but basically it's due out 12th of September, and it seems ages ago I actually wrote it, but it basically, my bit takes everything from 2019 to 2022, which is excellent because I don't have to change what I've written in there, and that's ex-MP, so I can still say MP. Brilliant.
Right. On that note, gentlemen, we are going to have to wrap this up. A big thank you to everybody
Can I just say very, very quickly, we're going to do another one really quick, Jonathan.
Yep, we are.
Because we've got some very important information to gift to the local public.
Yep.
You know what it is. I know what it is. But I won't do any spoilers.
No spoilers.
Incredibly important. We got a new kid on the block. Ed.
On that note, I just want to say a big thank you to our guests tonight. So to Richard, Higgy, and Peter. Big thank you to Chris for tonight as well. A big thank you also to everybody who tuned in, and we tried to get as many of your comments on as possible. As Chris says, we will be back very, very soon. We will be doing another live quite soon. Keep your eyes peeled on the Facebook feeds because there will be lots of photographs coming up there, and also my trail cam adventures. And hopefully some of you will be getting your trail cams as well. So On that note, until the next time.
Don't forget, anybody out there in Portishead that wants to get involved with Wild Portishead,
Yeah.
please get in contact with Jonathan. Okay. We're going to do an announcement that we're going to be working with. We're going to be working with an individual. Well, can I say we're going to be working with the Reverend Lindsay Smith, potentially doing joint talks and lectures throughout the winter months.
And there we go.
Right.
And you can get in contact with us at wildportishead@gmail.com. You can get in contact with us through Facebook Messenger or on our Facebook page. So yeah, we're all ears at the moment. So until the next time, thank you,
everybody.
Thank you everybody for watching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye then.
Thank you. Bye.